Have you ever stopped and wondered why you can grab tacos from a food truck right next to a noodle bar, all while standing in the shadow of some ancient cathedral? Well, that's what happens when cultures collide. Today, we're going to unlock the four hidden patterns that explain how these powerful interactions literally shape the world around us. So, what actually happens when different cultures meet? It's a huge question, and honestly, it's never been more important. With globalization kicking into high gear, our worlds are smashing together faster than ever, and it is fundamentally changing the way we all live. All this interaction, it leaves behind a physical mark, a visible imprint that geographers have a cool name for, the cultural landscape. It's the buildings, the food, the languages you hear on the street. And it turns out it's all sculpted by four main patterns, and we're about to break every single one of them down. Okay, let's start by thinking about this on a spectrum. On one end, you've got cultures kind of borrowing or adopting traits, and on the complete opposite end, you have them being totally absorbed. This brings us to our first two patterns, acculturation and assimilation. So first up is acculturation. The key word here is balance. This is where a group might adopt certain things from a more dominant culture, maybe a new language for work, but they absolutely hold on to who they are. It's all about creating this kind of dual identity, taking what you need without losing yourself in the process. And you see this play out in some really fascinating ways. And get this, it's not just a one-way street. Sure, you might speak English at the office, but your native tongue at home with your family. But think about it. What about when the dominant culture just completely falls in love with things like tacos or pho? That's acculturation too. The influence can and totally does flow both ways. Now, if we slide all the way to the other end of that spectrum, we find assimilation. This is a much more, total process. Here, the original cultural identity begins to fade away as a minority group gets completely absorbed into the dominant one. That dual identity we just talked about, it's gone. Okay, this is where things get really complex and, frankly, pretty heavy. Because assimilation isn't always one thing. It can be voluntary. Maybe a group chooses to blend in to get ahead, for a better life. But it can also be forced, a brutal process where a dominant culture actively and sometimes violently tries to erase another one. And history, it gives us some pretty stark examples of both. During the World Wars, a lot of German Americans voluntarily changed their last names, they stopped speaking German in public, they downplayed their heritage to avoid being seen as the enemy. Now, contrast that with the U.S. government's policies in the 19th century, which forced Native American children into boarding schools with the explicit goal of wiping out their native cultures. Two very, very different paths. So, we've seen adopting and absorbing. But what happens when cultures don't just do one or the other? What if they actually blend together to create something totally new? Or what if they just live side by side? Well, that brings us to our next two patterns, syncretism and multiculturalism. Okay, syncretism might just be one of the coolest, most creative forces in all of human history. It's not just mixing stuff together, it's a real fusion. You take two or more distinct cultural traditions, they combine, and what comes out has bits of the old, for sure, but it is ultimately something entirely new. It's like cultural alchemy. And the perfect example of this is the Day of the Dead. So you start with ancient indigenous Aztec traditions that honor ancestors. Then the Spanish arrive, bringing their Catholic beliefs like All Saints' Day. And what you get in the end, it isn't really Aztec, and it isn't purely Catholic. It's a totally new, vibrant, beautiful celebration that's a true synthesis of both. And once you start looking for it, you see this pattern everywhere. The Swahili language, it's a blend of local African languages and Arabic. The Sikh religion, it emerged from a beautiful blend of Hindu and Islamic beliefs. And so many Caribbean traditions like voodoo and Santeria are these incredibly powerful fusions of African, European, and indigenous spiritual practices. All right, and that brings us to our final pattern, multiculturalism. Now, this is a whole different model. Instead of blending or absorbing, the goal here is just coexistence. The idea is that different cultures can live together in one society, that diversity is actually a strength, and that there's absolutely no pressure for any group to give up what makes them unique. You can think of it as a twist on that old melting pot idea. In a truly multicultural society, everyone might share some core values, like a belief in democracy or freedom. But they also get to hold on to their own languages, their own foods, their own traditions. It's less of a melting pot, and it's way more like a big, awesome salad bowl. Everything's in there together, but you can still see the individual ingredients. And you can literally see multiculturalism out on the landscape. It looks like vibrant ethnic neighborhoods, signs on the street in a dozen different languages, an absolutely mind-blowing variety of restaurants and places of worship, and a city calendar that is just packed with festivals from all over the world. It's the buzzing energy of a global city like London or Toronto. Whew, okay, I know that was a lot to take in, so let's pull all four of these powerful patterns together for one last, super clear look at how they all fit together. So here it is, the bottom line. Acculturation is all about adopt some, keep some. Assimilation is total adoption, which creates a more uniform landscape. Syncretism is about blending to create something brand new, and multiculturalism is all about coexisting to create this incredible, diverse patchwork. So why does any of this matter? Because these are not just some dusty academic terms, right? These four patterns are active, living forces. They explain the menu at your favorite restaurant, the music you hear blasting from a car, the festivals that pop up in your city, and the very fabric of the neighborhood you call home. And that really leaves us with one last massive question to think about. As our world keeps getting smaller and our cultures continue to collide and combine in new and unpredictable ways, which of these patterns, or heck, maybe a new one we haven't even seen yet, is going to shape the human story of tomorrow?